Since you're watching this video, I'm sure there's at least some part of you that's curious about what basic income is. So I'm going to give you a little introduction to what I've learned about basic income and tell you about how it's impacted me and where I'm going to go with this series. To give you some context, last year I was contacted by somebody who asked me if I'd ever heard of basic income and if I'd be interested in joining a pilot program. So as you can imagine, that was a little bit shocking for me. I didn't really believe it. I was very skeptical, but it's a real experiment. It's a real pilot program that I'm in, and I really am receiving $1,000 a month, no questions asked, right now. And while I'd heard of basic income before, I didn't totally know exactly what the idea was behind this particular pilot and other pilots. So I had to educate myself, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I have learned. I am participating in one of about 150 programs that exist worldwide for basic income. The concept is pretty simple. It's basic income. So what you're doing to help people is to just give them money, which is a resource that they can then use to cover things like food, housing, bills, investing in your career, or paying off debt. And those are just a couple examples of many ways that people could use a basic income. I have the equivalent of a debit card. It's reloaded every month, and I spend it however I want and however I need. And what's interesting to me is that politicians, not just in America, but all over the world, are considering whether or not you should also be getting a basic income. Which is to say, they're considering giving all of their citizens a basic income in order to eliminate poverty and save taxpayers' money. Right now, there are more than 10,000 people enrolled in basic income pilots, and that's over $300 million being spent to find out if it actually works. I figured I might as well just start with myself. So here's my story. I'm a documentary television producer and digital media producer and editor, and as a freelancer, sometimes my work can be very sporadic or unreliable, which, as you can imagine, translates into having sporadic or unreliable income. So doing socially conscious work and trying to make media that I believe matters and kind of having that through line in my career can be challenging because sometimes projects can be hard to find, or you have to wait for your project to get started, and sometimes it's a few months. When you have those down periods, it can be really rough. So what do I do in between? How do I continue to use my skills and my talent towards my career while also trying to make it when things go dry? Pretty soon after I accepted my offer to join this basic income program, I actually had a very real-world example of how and why it could and would benefit me, which is that I showed up to my Monday morning meeting for my production job, and the showrunner contacted me after the meeting to let me know that I didn't have work for that week or the following week. So I immediately lost 2 weeks of work out of the blue. That's half of your month's pay. That's normally a very frustrating and panic-inducing experience, but because I had that basic income waiting for me, I at least had a little bit of a softer landing than I normally would. The basic income obviously couldn't possibly cover 2 weeks of pay for me, but at least it made sure that I would have my basic expenses covered for those 2 weeks and know that I would be taken care of and I would make it through. And once I did get back to work, I now had extra money every month, and what should I do with that? So I decided to start investing in the tools that I use for my work. I tend to not upgrade until it's just absolutely necessary, and that can really put a hamper on the work that I do because whether you want to believe it or not, media is, of course, a tech-based industry. And tech evolves faster than I can afford to keep up with it. So I bought a new laptop, and I can now work on the go and have a lot more confidence that my laptop will not fail me on the road, at a cafe, or on set. I bought a new phone, which I'm using to record this video right now. And I feel so much better about my ability to keep up with work because I have better tools with which to do that. And at the same time, I can use those tools to tell you about basic income. So you see what I did there? The freedom that this extra money has given me has sort of lifted like an emotional and mental burden off of me as well, because I just feel safe. And oddly, I've been working more now than I ever have before in my career, which might make you think that I don't actually need the money, but I'm going to tell you why that's not correct. It's amazing how when you know that you have a baseline every month that will be there no matter what, you allow yourself the freedom to pay for things you normally wouldn't, or that you tell yourself you can't afford. For instance, I haven't been to the dentist in like way more time than I ever want to admit, but I felt like I can afford this. I should just go. I should just get a dental plan and go to the dentist. People who work in a freelance capacity, a lot of artists, don't take care of themselves because there's an economic barrier to getting the care that you need and feeling confident that you can afford insurance, that you can afford a trip to the dentist, that you can afford a trip to whatever specialist you need to see. And so we cut corners. And sometimes that's cutting corners on our health. And I have been guilty of that exact thing. I can't tell you how many other freelance artists have the same story. I did go to the dentist. I am doing really well. They were actually shocked that my mouth is completely healthy and I don't have any problems. But it could have been a lot worse, so I'm very lucky and I'm very grateful that I had the money should I have needed it. Also, I think I might have to get my wisdom teeth out, but that's a whole other story. So after 6 months, I can tell you that basic income has obviously helped me a lot. I've been able to invest in my career, to have tools to make me better at what I do. I've been able to go to the dentist, which is amazing, and I'm doing well for that. And I also just have this burden lifted from my shoulders of my fear of not having work. But that's just my story. And like I said, there's over 10,000 people participating in programs like this all over the world, and I wanted to know, how are they being impacted? So I asked.
I've just been kind of like waiting until like, what will it feel like to live somewhere where I feel welcome and I have my needs met and all these things, and I'm just not living somewhere just because it's cheap. I'm moving this month, which feels really good. I wouldn't have been able to do that otherwise. I'm just like feel grateful to have the opportunity to get to move and not worry about making ends meet for a minute. And yeah, that's like the biggest change that's happening in my life right now because of this.
You know, for 26 years, I've been, dependent on my mom. And now that I've gone to college, it worried me a little bit how I would be able to afford it. Or like, I didn't want to like burden my mom with something else. She's already been supporting me and she's still supporting me. I live under her roof. She pays the bills, she buys food. And I felt like just being able to support myself in any facet is just so beneficial, because I can take that burden off her shoulders, no matter how small it may be. I feel like me being able to support myself and her not having to worry about, going and buying me clothes, or if I need something, some piece of equipment, I can save my money up and I can get that for myself.
Since I first got, first installment, so that's what the first thing I did was got a pretty good tool set, for myself so I could do my repairs. And it makes a big difference rather than putting in the car in the shop, your oil changes, brakes, things like that, where I would have to pay garage fees. But now, like I said, I just do my own yard, my own driveway. But I could never really afford all the good tools I need to get a lot of jobs done, because my dad was a mechanic, so I know a lot of mechanical skills. So that's the first thing I did was get tools.
I have 2 little boys. This is my youngest, Ronan. The grant was able to get the coat that we couldn't get. It was able to get the Tide detergent that we could, it was really, the bill of the laundry was down. It wasn't so much of a stress. Being a full-time student is a whole nother stress, but the grant alleviated it. I
was not surprised with these answers. I'm sure you're not surprised either. It's the same story over and over, people struggling to make ends meet and basic income changing that for them. I just want to take a second to talk about poverty. Living in extreme poverty means you cannot afford basic food, clothing, shelter, or transportation. In the United States, there are about 40 million Americans who fall under this category. Most basic income programs give about $500 a month to their participants. So you can imagine, basic income, not exactly gonna make you rich. It's not even enough money to survive on, actually, in most places. But it's designed to make sure that no one is living in extreme poverty. We just want to make sure that everybody has something. I think if everyone were to receive a basic income tomorrow, it wouldn't suddenly create this equal utopian society, even though I'd like that. What it actually does is make our economies a little bit more humane and give everyone an opportunity at success. What I'm about to say is, to me, the most interesting piece of information that I'm going to include in this video today, which is this. Politicians all over the world are considering basic income for their citizens because of how cheap it is. You would not believe how much money we spend on welfare programs which are wildly inefficient. In direct transfer basic income programs, you're cutting out the middle person, you're cutting out the bureaucracy, and you're just giving people what they need already. And as it turns out, these programs are so efficient that basic income is consistently rated one of the most cost-effective ways to reduce poverty. I bet you never thought that giving people money for free would be less expensive than not giving people money for free, but as it turns out, that's the case. So if that's true, then what about all these other factors that I know you're thinking right now, because I thought the same things? If you have questions, I bet you have questions. If you have questions, I think I'll probably answer them in the coming videos. Questions like, does basic income stop people from working? Is everyone just gonna kind of get lazy now? Will it work for people who are struggling with addiction? And how will these people know what to do with the money? You might have even more questions than that. I'm gonna make several episodes here. We're gonna explore everything. We're gonna have deep dives on different topics. You know what I'm gonna say next. Like and subscribe if you wanna know more about this topic, basic income, and how other people are being impacted. Until then, thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and be well.